Hello everybody, David Kennedy here, Canopy MLS and Association President here once again with an ordinary realtor who did some extraordinary things. Hi.
Hi, Dave.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Not bad,
Good.
not bad. So when did you get into, well, let's take this back. You're a unicorn, JC. What I mean by that is you are a native of Charlotte, is that correct?
That's correct. A native of Charlotte, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn,
I was born in Brooklyn on Van Street,
okay.
which would intersects with McDowell Street.
So, I don't want to be rude, but when were you born?
Oh, David, take me back, don't you? September 29th, 1936.
1936. So you were born here in Charlotte in 1936, and you grew up in the Brooklyn neighborhood. Truth be told, the Brooklyn neighborhood is getting, their story is kind of getting told to a lot of people that weren't aware of it. So what was Brooklyn like back then in 1936 and in your childhood growing up?
Well, in my childhood, Brooklyn was a very nice neighborhood, had nice businesses. It had a lot of what you would say like independence, where we could do things. We didn't have that much balance like we have today. We had grocery stores, restaurants, where we could look at people and say, I want to be like that. Where today that has been torn down, and our children are looking for different things to do, and some things they can't find to do, so therefore we have the violence that we got to deal with.
So if we read the history books, you start to have these laws that are coming down, straight from Truman in the White House, where you start to analyze neighborhoods throughout the United States, and if certain neighborhoods don't fit a certain prescription from the powers that be, then they could be earmarked for something almost that can be, you call it urban renewal, but what is urban renewal from your perspective?
Black removal.
That is straight from James Baldwin.
That's right. The urban renewal looked like every area where blacks were and they were being progressive and doing something. That's where we had the federal government come in and just tear it down based on the fact that they're making progress. Yeah, they're making progress, but they're destroying the progress that was made by blacks.
So there was progress being made in the black community, but it was still somehow identified as not progressive enough, and they wanted to renew the land use there, and then that's how that came about. What happened to the people that lived in Brooklyn once things, came in and were?
Well, the people that lived in Brooklyn was dispersed into the west side, out on Batesford Road in the Greenville area. And there were some nice neighborhoods like McCory Heights. Used to have a beautiful neighborhood set up on a hill. And they came in and tore it down to put up 16. And that's where Parker Heights came in, where Dr. Williams bought some land out Batesford Road and developed it.
So we begin with a thriving neighborhood that was in Brooklyn that was torn down for urban renewal, and then where the neighborhood went, that was eventually torn down for the construction of a highway,
right.
16. So does in your opinion, do you see a pattern of development here in Charlotte resulting in displacement for black people still to this day?
I do, where we are talking about affordable housing. It's, in my opinion, it's not giving our people the right and the ingenuity and the potential to do for themselves. It puts people in a form of mental comfort that I really don't have to get out here and work, and I can live in this nice, beautiful 3-bedroom apartment for $500 a month, where everybody else is paying $12. So it takes away that ability to really think and to do. So somehow we've got to change the way we're doing things. And I can see where the power to be see that it's comfortable for them because that puts that problem out the way. But it creates a problem for those that they're putting out the way.
So in the midst of this historical trajectory, at one point do you enter in to the real estate industry as like a practitioner? When do you come in and start getting involved in the real estate industry?
Well, you know, when I started real estate, when I got out the Army, we didn't have the GI Bill, so I had to work during the day to go to school at night, and then I got a job at the post office at night and went to John C. Smith and finished. And when I was at the post office, this gentleman that was a supervisor asked me, well, why are you doing all of this? I said, well, I want to do something for people. So he said, well, there's a real estate school across the street. Have you heard about it? I said, I don't know nothing about real estate.
And what was the name of the real estate school? Which school did you go to?
Weaver School.
Weaver School.
Yeah.
All right. Now, when you were in the Army, when did you serve in the Army?
I was in Korea.
Korea.
55,
All right.
57.
All right. And when you got out of Korea, you know, when some people get out of the service, there's a GI Bill, but for you, was there opportunity there?
There was none.
There was none.
No.
Okay. So you're entering into the real estate industry right in the 60s. Is that correct?
Right. I got a license in 1966.
All right. So when you get a license, we're looking back like at some of our history, and we see that you're right at that point in time where black real estate practitioners were not in the Realtor Association that we have today. Once you had your license, what was the next step for you?
Well, the next step was that I started selling houses, and I tried to join the board, and I couldn't. But the teacher, Mr. Delaplane, that taught me, we went in together and opened up a multi-listing.
Okay.
And from that, you know, we did well. And I kept trying to get in the Board of Realtors. So finally, I got in the Board of Realtors in 71. And during this period, you know, blacks had a lot of problems with credit. And I used to work to 9 o'clock at night, helping them to learn how to straighten this credit out. And I started teaching blacks from 9 to 1.
So in 1971, when you became a member, at that time, did you have to have a sponsor to get in? Were they still doing that sponsorship where somebody has to like vouch for you?
Yes, John Hardin and Jimmy. I'm trying to think of Jimmy's last name.
Jimmy Basinger?
Basinger.
Yeah.
They were my sponsors.
Do you remember, you were active relatively the same time as the first black member, Dan Hennigan. Did you know him?
Yes.
All right. So how well did you know Dan?
I knew him pretty well. He was, you know, Dan was a minister, and he's quite busy in his philosophy teaching. And I tried to go to work with him, but he wasn't ready for that. And Motley also was in the business.
So do you remember if Jimmy sponsored Dan? Do you remember who sponsored Dan to get in?
I really don't know.
Yeah, we don't know either. That's why we think it's Jimmy, and we wanted to ask, but Jimmy, he passed away.
Yeah, well, Jimmy was a very good man. He was very open and helping people. Look, he came over and took my wife to lunch.
Okay.
And when she came back, she said, "You need to join the board."
So, in the midst, so now you're on the board. You're in with the Realtor Association. at that time, still, there's just not a lot of black realtors or black real estate professionals that can represent black homeowners. Did you encounter inequity in terms of, within maybe urban renewal specifically, or just within the real estate industry, where it was tough for black Americans to A, get a realtor, B, to get into home ownership? Did you experience that?
Well, yes, that's why I used to teach classes from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning to get blacks in the real estate business. And I was selling like 3 and 4 houses a week. So I used to sit down with these people at night and teach them how to write explanations of what the problems was. I also managed houses, Parker Heights, which was under the HUD criteria. So I got to learn a lot about the people that ran HUD. So I was able to help a lot of people by knowing what was going on with HUD.
How many years did you teach from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m.?
Let's see, probably about 2 years till my wife got married.
And once you got married, that kind of cut that. You got to make a choice at that point. I get it, man. I get it. When you look back, I guess, what are some of the struggles that you encountered looking back? Maybe what was the biggest, or what are the ones that stand out? And then how did you overcome some of those obstacles in your career?
When the saving and loan failed, I was trying to rehab some properties because things were getting bad, and I had gotten a loan approved at this mortgage company, and one of the officials in the mortgage company took one of the papers out that I needed to close. So by having managed property under the HUD certifications, I knew a lot of people there. So I went to HUD and I explained what was happening, and they gave me that paper.
I tell you, it's as much as people today can gripe about the mortgage process and all the paperwork. It's like a portal where you upload your documentation and you've got evidence that it's there, and it's not going to go missing.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's an advantage that people today who just kind of want things quick and want it painless, they don't realize some of the links that have to be taken today just so we ensure that none of that, none of the missing papers happen.
Yeah.
How involved, I guess, if you had your, did you work for a firm or did you have your own firm?
I had my own firm.
Okay. And how long did you own that?
I still own it.
When did that start?
Well, I went into business full time in 1971. I was working at my mother's house, and Jimmy McKee, that owned the Excelsior Club, had a house next door to the club. And he said, "Look, you need to be more visible." So he rented me the first 2 rooms, and from that's when I had some people to come in and offer me the management of Parker Heights. And during this time, there were some bills passed by President Johnson that helped the employment of a lot of blacks. And from, I'd say 6 to 8 o'clock, 8 p.m., they had happy hour.
Okay.
So one drink in my hand for 2 hours and meeting everybody in there. That's where I was able to get all these sales.
Wow. So you were basically one of the hottest clubs, the Excelsior,
Right.
In Charlotte at the time. Your office, you had 2 rooms right next door, so you could knock off work, go have happy hour, and you have instant connections. You got leads, right?
That's right.
That was ingenious. That was good. That was good. So what's the name of the firm that you have right now? What's the name of your company?
It's Caesar Corporation.
Caesar
Cousar
Corporation.
Roads.
All right. Now, who are some of the contemporaries that you work with now, some of the realtors now that you're working with?
Well, I'm not working that much. I'm just managing some property.
Right.
But, I still work with, like, Hackett Enterprise. Let's see who else. I'm not doing that much, but, excuse me.
Did you have a good, you wonder, you're one of the first, you're a groundbreaker for our industry. How close were you to other groundbreaking African Americans in their industries? In other words, for example, did you know former Mayor Harvey Gantt? Did you know him?
Yes. Huh?
So did you ever sell him a house? Did you help him buy a house?
No, but I used to, meet with Harvey and Mel and all of them, and Julius Chambers. We had an organization called BUF, Black United Front. And we used to meet in Chambers' office just about every week, strategizing how to integrate and help the city.
So from BUF, to what extent do you feel like Charlotte is integrated today? Do you feel, or are you satisfied with it? What kind of trajectory do you think we're on from an integration perspective?
Well, it's integrated, but we still have somewhat like a class society. I think we need more independent black businesses. We need more banks. It's that we're just servicing the community, but we're not really using that imagination of another ethnic group to create. We're just simply following what's there. And Charlotte is missing out on a lot by not being able to use all these brains instead of just...
So back when you were beginning in the real estate business, you almost had to have a chummy relationship with the bankers in order to get the credit or the mortgage. Do you still feel like, to some extent, the black population is still having to come up with, it's harder for them to get loans, it's harder for them to establish the relationships? In other words, do you see them going more to the credit unions or like a small branch bank, or do you think they do that because it's easier, or do you think it's just, do you think there's still some discrimination in some of the major banks? What are your thoughts there?
Well, Dave, I don't think it's that discrimination. It's just the simple fact that they got to begin to honor the fact that they need to have good credit. And a lot of people will not actually be responsible for what they need to be responsible for. Sure, we still need that relationship with the banker, because the banker needs to know who he's lending his money to. But sometimes we think just because you're supposed to do this to me and you don't, then we scream at discrimination. When actually we need to start looking at the mirror and saying, well, what do I need to do?
You had mentioned, from when you were born, we had Brooklyn, then we got displaced, and then from there, they ran 16 up into the new neighborhood. Today, we have transit overlays that are being discussed for our links line. Are there concerns with regards to where the trains are going to be held? Are you fearful that, say, some of the established black neighborhoods that we have now will get will have another version of urban renewal with the transit lines that could go in for transportation, and specifically the links line?
Well, we don't really have just identified black neighborhoods except going out Badersford Road. And Charlie is coming out there. I'm sure it would help economically. Now, the problem is, will we be able to capitalize on any of this? Do we have the training? Do we have the financing do we have the creativity to do this? At one time, Mr. McDonald used to own cafeteria on Batesford Road. I sold him 4 acres of land, and he wanted to put a shopping center there. Well, when I went to county commissioner, they turned it down because they said that you don't need that. So I asked to let me go out and do research and find out why. And when I did, I found out that a lot of the land was owned by whites that weren't doing anything. And when I went back, Governor Martin was on county commission, and he was the one who made the motion to give me that opportunity. When I went back and showed them that all the land that was owned business was owned by whites, and they were just sitting there waiting to capitalize, they changed that and gave McDonald business.
So was this something that happened often, where you would have deals that would be stalled, that you thought based upon just an African American or black business or entrepreneur being treated differently, or maybe being marked as a higher risk?
Well, when you didn't have that many blacks that had the economic power to really do anything. And in most cases, we were in the church, the funeral home. McDonald was a difference because he came here from New York and he was an entrepreneur. So he presented that challenge and we were able to overcome that. I don't think that we had the opportunity or the need to pursue those things, where today we probably need to, and hopefully we will start doing that.
So was it a big deal to you when Roger Parham was elected president of the Realtor Association? Do you remember that?
Oh, of course I do.
All right. What did that mean to you when that happened?
That means what I was doing didn't go in vain.
And then shortly after, Brenda Hayden comes in, and I served with Brenda. I served a little bit with Roger as well. And now Brenda is going to be the chair of REBIC, the Real Estate Building Industry Coalition.
That's great.
So we're moving things up.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts? Obviously, Roger being the first African American president. Last year, Anthony Lindsay was the first Realtor of the Year for Charlotte that happened to be African American. Do you know Lindsay? How well do you know him?
I know Lindsay, but I don't know him that well. I've met him at meetings when I used to come to a lot of meetings, and I thought that's a great idea, and I'm proud of him.
Yeah, it's good. When you look back on your career and all the things that you've done, what advice, what advice would you give realtors today? What would you want us to be mindful of from your perspective?
Well, I think realtors are doing a great job. I know when I joined the board, it was like having open arms, and I was a person that I served on several boards. I learned a lot, and hopefully they might have looked at me and my experience and might have absorbed a lot of the things that we might have been going through, because I didn't mind telling them. I think on the path that we're going as realtors, we're doing a good job. I think as a black, they need to have more organization and planning so that they can confront and sit down and negotiate without emotions, but facts.
From a different perspective, one might say it must be very difficult to be the first black anybody to do anything. how many times did you feel like you were the first black person in a situation in the real estate industry, in a room, on one of those boards or committees, and did you feel a sense of, it's not just me here, it's I have a sense or a duty for people who are going to come after me? Did that ever enter your mind, or were you kind of just plugged in trying to do what was on the business of the agenda for that day?
Well, a little bit of both, but I wanted to set an example that I wanted to do a good job and let people know that we're capable of doing this. And hopefully it paid off.
When you see the old neighborhood, Brooklyn, when you see how it is today, what kind of thoughts run through your mind? Do you see like the park outside of the window? What are your thoughts there, and how does it bring back memories? Is it mixed emotions? What kind of runs through your mind?
Well, it does, have mixed emotions, because you look at it and you say, now, why couldn't we own part of this? You see, Attorney Bell was a fighter for a lot of the black owners in Brooklyn. And he had me appointed by a judge to do appraisals. And it's amazing the difference in opinion and prices.
So you submitted your appraisal at one value for a lot of the businesses out there for perhaps a comparable, and then there was another appraisal done, and it was it different, obviously?
Of course it was. It was different. But after a while, I got to know the appraisals. So we got together, and I could voice my opinion, and they could voice theirs, and there was no animosity, and we came up with better ideas.
How was it that how did you gain the respect? I guess it was, you gained respect off of just the work that you did as an appraiser, but back in those days, to come up with a different opinion and still have a good relationship with someone that has a difference in the value. What were those meetings like when you were bringing that? How did you know who to take the appraisal to back then, to just say, hey, I think you're off a little bit on the value. Would you take a look at mine? Was that kind of how it went?
Somewhat. But I served on a lot of boards here at Board of Realtors. The MLS board, grievance committee, and when I was involved in a lot of things. Like when we started the Regional Realtors, I was on that committee. When we started computers, I was on that committee. So I was involved in a lot of things. So I knew these people by first name.
Okay. You had the connections. So you basically had the connections established by virtue of your service,
right,
on all these committees. So it almost seemed like in the late 90s was when we started to see that trend from people going from the listing books to the computer terminals, and you were there.
Right.
How did that go? I mean, was there a reticence to change?
We were all glad to get rid of the book. There were a lot of questions because we didn't know that much about computers, but we had a good man running the board, Roy, and he was able to get that concept over to us, and we voted it in.
So it was a membership vote. It was from each member, right? Not just the board. And if I read correctly, I think it was unanimous.
Yeah.
So you're right. We were all glad. When you say we were all glad to get rid of the MLS books, the vote was unanimous. So
yeah.
We can back it up. What's your favorite? That's one board and committee you served on. What's another one that really stands out in your mind with regards to your service here at the association?
Professional standards.
All right. What did that mean to you?
Well, it meant that you had a lot of confidence in me to put me on that board. I was the vice chairman of it. And that's where all the problems came after everything else went through all the other boards. So,
Did you see there could be people can embrace integration and things like Civil Rights Act on the surface, and there still could be some underlying animosity. When you were on professional standards, did you ever have instances where you felt like your presence on professional standards really helped solidify that the new law of the land would need to be upheld? Did you feel a sense that your position on the board kind of helped solidify that even at the highest parts of our association you still had to uphold those certain ethics?
I think it probably helped, but I don't think it needed to. I think we had some very broad-minded people on that board, and I think the decisions were fairly.
And you felt, when you said, when I first joined the board, you felt embraced. You felt like people were happy. You felt good coming in. You felt welcomed. And that Jimmy was good. He's a great guy to get you in. Did you feel like, is that an accurate depiction of how it felt coming in?
Yeah, well, Jimmy, a very personal person. With him going around with me, it was just like two brothers, and a lot of people would like to say, well, you should have felt discrimination, but I mean, it could have been underlining, but I'm overlooking it because I had a purpose.
All right. What's one thing that you want to leave us with here today to just kind of maybe keep our eye on the ball or to focus on as we move forward as an association in MLS and foundation?
Well, I think we're doing a great job as we are. We may need to become more involved with looking at the total picture of all ethnic groups and making sure that they're all involved at the highest capacity of what they can do.
Just diversify who's coming to the table.
Right.
So everybody
can be accounted for and can be participating in decision making of what the board needs to do.